May 12, 1780. Charleston, South Carolina witnessed one of the biggest victories in British military history.
More than 5,000 American soldiers were forced to lay down their weapons in surrender that very day.
Over 300 cannons of various sizes quietly fell into the hands of the victorious British Army. Nearly 6,000 additional muskets were also seized by British forces during that same long afternoon. This single event stood as America's largest recorded surrender at any point in its short history. Nothing of comparable scale would happen again until the devastating surrenders of the Civil War decades later.
British General Henry Clinton proudly sailed back to New York, carrying the remarkable news of this victory. He genuinely believed at the time that he had finally broken the back of the rebellion.
And in that specific triumphant moment, his confident thinking seemed to be entirely and completely correct.
There was simply no organized American army left standing anywhere in the entire southern colonies by then. The single most strategically important port city in the region was now firmly under total British military control. London erupted into wild celebration the very moment this incredible news finally arrived across the ocean.
British officers toasted one another loudly in victory inside crowded taverns scattered throughout the capital city.
Nearly everyone genuinely believed at the time that the long, exhausting war was finally nearing its end.
But there remained one absolutely crucial thing that nobody in London yet fully understood or anticipated. This particular victory, celebrated so loudly across England, would not actually end the war at all.
This very same victory would instead quietly go on to guarantee Britain's eventual and total defeat. And the specific decisions made by British commanders in the following weeks built that defeat piece by piece.
The story of this eventual collapse really begins back in the difficult closing months of 1779.
British commanders sitting comfortably in London were steadily running out of fresh military ideas by then. The long-stalled war being fought up in the northern colonies had dragged on for several years. British forces still held New York City firmly, but controlled very little additional territory beyond that point.
Washington's Continental Army was badly battered by years of fighting, but somehow still remained stubbornly alive. France had officially joined the war on the American side back in the year 1778. Now the powerful British Navy suddenly had to worry about far more than scattered colonial militias. So British military strategists finally made the calculated decision to shift their entire focus southward instead. Their overall military plan seemed fairly simple and straightforward enough when drawn up on paper.
British commanders firmly believed that the southern colonies were secretly full of quiet, loyal supporters.
Thousands of ordinary Americans supported the British Crown, but stayed silent out of genuine fear of reprisal.
Capture the major southern cities, they reasoned, and those hidden loyalists would finally rise up openly. These newly emboldened loyalists would then join British ranks and help hold the newly captured territory permanently. This entire ambitious military plan eventually became widely known to history as the Southern Strategy.
At first, absolutely everything unfolded almost exactly the way British military planners had originally hoped it would.
City of Savannah, Georgia fell quickly to advancing British forces back in December of 1778.
The colony of South Carolina was next on the growing list of strategic targets. Charleston itself was considered by far the ultimate prize of this entire southern military campaign. General Clinton left New York behind in December of 1779, bringing his massive invasion force southward. He brought with him a total of 90 ships and over 13,000 professional soldiers. This was clearly not just some small, opportunistic raiding force sent ashore to harass defenses. This instead represented the full and overwhelming military weight of the entire British Empire concentrated together. British troops began landing on the small islands surrounding Charleston Harbor back in February of 1780. General Clinton advanced steadily toward the city with careful, deliberate, and almost cautious military precision throughout the campaign.
His assembled forces successfully crossed the treacherous Ashley River as they gradually approached the defended city itself.
By the later weeks of March, his engineers had already dug extensive siege trenches near Charleston's outer walls. On April 8th, ships of the Royal Navy pushed straight past the defensive guns positioned at Fort Moultrie. With that accomplished, the city of Charleston was now completely and inescapably surrounded on every single side. Major General Benjamin Lincoln commanded Charleston's increasingly desperate defense throughout this long and grueling siege. He had roughly 5,000 troops serving directly under his personal command inside the city.
General Washington had already written to Lincoln beforehand, offering him a stern and prescient warning.
He urged Lincoln to abandon the city entirely if the situation ever began looking genuinely hopeless.
Charleston's own civilian political leaders repeatedly begged Lincoln to remain in the city and keep fighting.
They promised him again and again that substantial reinforcements were already well on their way.
Lincoln ultimately chose to stay and continue defending the city, and that fateful choice proved absolutely fatal.
For 6 brutal and grueling weeks, British engineers kept digging their approach trenches steadily closer and closer each night. Relentless nightly artillery bombardments pounded the trapped city without any real pause or mercy shown whatsoever. Deadly disease spread rapidly through the overcrowded and increasingly desperate garrison trapped inside the city's crumbling walls. Critical supplies of food and ammunition both began running dangerously low as the long siege dragged on. On April 14th, Tarleton's aggressive cavalry finally succeeded in cutting off the last remaining escape route outer. After that crucial route was severed, Lincoln's trapped army genuinely had absolutely nowhere left to go. On May 12th, General Lincoln formally and officially surrendered the entire city over to Clinton's forces. Clinton deliberately denied Lincoln's defeated soldiers the traditional honors of war normally extended to a defeated garrison. Soldiers were forced to march out of the city with their regimental flags rolled up tightly. Their military drums remained completely and eerily silent throughout that entire painful and humiliating procession through the streets. This was a deliberate and carefully calculated act of public humiliation designed on purpose by Clinton himself. It sent a very clear and unmistakable message to every rebel sympathizer scattered throughout the southern colonies. But Charleston's dramatic fall did not actually sink the broader British war effort in America at all. What General Clinton chose to do next changed absolutely everything about the entire trajectory of the war. This is really where the true and unexpected story of this southern campaign genuinely begins to turn. After the formal surrender ceremony concluded, Clinton issued 3 separate and quite distinct proclamations to the local population. The first 2 proclamations followed fairly standard and unremarkable military practice that was common for that particular era. Anyone who had previously fought against the crown could simply accept parole in exchange for peace. This generous arrangement allowed former rebel soldiers to simply return home again and live in relative peace. Most South Carolinians accepted this generous offer without much hesitation or resistance at all. They were genuinely exhausted after enduring several long years of brutal, grinding fighting throughout their homeland. Many of them just wanted to finally be left alone in relative peace and quiet. Then, on June 3rd, 1780, Clinton made the fateful decision to issue his controversial Third Proclamation. This single, poorly considered document effectively undid nearly everything that the long and costly siege had achieved. It formally revoked every single parole agreement that had already been generously granted to former rebels. Every remaining civilian in the region now had to swear an oath of active and demonstrated loyalty. Simple, passive neutrality toward the ongoing conflict was no longer considered an acceptable position under these harsh terms. They now had to actually take up arms and fight directly on behalf of the crown. This effectively meant fighting against their own neighbors, relatives, and lifelong close friends throughout the region. For thousands of already exhausted men, this particular demand felt genuinely and utterly impossible to accept. Many of these men had brothers and close friends who were still fighting on the Patriot side. This single, ill-conceived proclamation turned countless quiet, war-weary farmers back into determined and angry rebels overnight. Clinton then promptly sailed back to New York almost immediately after issuing this fateful and consequential proclamation. He left Lord Cornwallis behind in charge of the entire ongoing British campaign in the south. Cornwallis had therefore inherited a deeply unstable province that was now essentially primed and ready to explode. But the controversial proclamation alone certainly wasn't the only spark behind this rapidly growing wave of anger. One particular name attached itself firmly and infamously to this rapidly growing rage sweeping the backcountry: Banastre Tarleton. On May 29th, just 17 short days after Charleston had officially fallen, Tarleton finally struck decisively. He caught up with Colonel Buford's slowly retreating column of soldiers after riding through brutally oppressive summer heat. Buford made the fatal decision to refuse surrender when he was first given the actual chance. What followed this fateful refusal became widely remembered as one of the darkest moments of the entire war. Tarleton's cavalry charged forward into the American lines without displaying any real hesitation or restraint whatsoever. The overwhelmed American defensive lines broke apart almost instantly under the sheer force of the cavalry assault.